Thanks everyone for coming and welcome. If you haven't been here before to the BSA, my name is Nigel Jacob. I'm one of the managing directors here at the BSA, managing director for innovation. I call myself chief innovation officer, but that exists only in my mind. We're incredibly happy to have you join us for this first info session slash workshop slash ideas jam for the request for innovation. I mean, the quick story, you'll hear all about this in a few minutes, but the quick story is that the BSA is remaking itself, reinventing itself. And part of that effort is creating better, different, broader opportunities to connect with innovators in the built environment more broadly in Boston. So what we're going to do tonight is, I assume that you've all seen the request for innovation. And so that was our initial prototype for designing a welcome front to working with the BSA. So we're going to do a few things today. We'll talk a little bit about who we are, and in a second we'll get the team to introduce themselves. We'll talk about, as a reminder of the RFI. You've presumably all seen it before, but we'll talk about it, not terribly long. And we'll sort of talk about what resources we have access to, and you would have access to if you were to work with us. And then lastly, we'll talk about the process, and we'll round out with a workshop of sorts, sort of an idea jam on trying to get you, trying to encourage thinking and collaboration about the ideas. So first things first, we'll like, who are we? Well, in terms of the people of the innovation team, even the names are still in process. So you'll hear innovation practice, you'll hear innovation team. I don't know, we're trying to lead the charge here, but this is really a group effort at the BSA. So I will hand it over to Ben.
Oh, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Peterson. I am the co-director of the Civic Design Lab. Happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Madeline Pace. Currently, I have joined the innovation practice team as the cadence calibration manager. Internally, we will refer to that as assessment and reporting. And I'll talk a bit more about what that will look like on the innovation practice team in a bit. But yeah, really excited to have you all here and looking forward to the conversation tonight.
I'm Jenny Efren. I am the other co-director of the Civic Design Lab, along with Ben, and then a couple of our colleagues are either not here this evening, but we lost them. So Taylor Johnson will be the initiative manager, and then Wandy Pasquale will be our research agenda manager. Is that correct? Design. Sorry.
Design,
Inquiry,
and research manager.
Right. He has a much better title than I just.
so that's us that are here. Nice to meet all of you.
Yes. I'm not looking, there's so few. So
I know.
can we just go around the room really quickly and just say who you are?
Yeah.
Your institution or not. I'll just say, yeah, just let know so we don't have to point at you, but we can try to refer to you by name.
Finishing my peanut butter pretzel bite.
Right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caroline Shannon. I'm a strategist architect at Gensler.
Hi, everyone. My name's Dan Shen, and I'm currently a designer at William Rowan Associates.
I'm Emmeline Gojak. I'm the placemaking co-chair at BSA, and then also I work at PCA as a architect.
Hi, I'm Tyler. I am at formerly EYP, now Page Architects and Engineers.
I'm Jesus, part of Paletta, the collective of designers, creative.
I'm the other designer, part of that creative you just mentioned, Paletta. My name is Emilio.
I'm Amelia.
Oh,
And I'm an architect.
My name is Jason. I run a little design strategy also for Ephemera. I created
I'm Carrie Riafi. I am
I have a small practice and I'm also an associate professor of architecture at University of Massachusetts in Amherst. I'm a sabbatical this year, so I am back to my stuff in that.
Sorry, I was a student when you were teaching at RUSI, but I had.
Yes, that's where I was before.
Yeah. Nice to see you.
Nice.
And then, hey everyone, I'm Hannah Gibson. I'm an urban designer and planner at CISA.
Welcome. We're
Great.
just introducing ourselves, so you're right on time. Do you want to share your name and where you're coming from?
Yeah, I am Olivia Lang. I am an architect at Clancy.
Yeah.
Welcome. Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric White. I'm the architect here at BSA. Welcome.
You ready? Great.
And maybe actually before, just to add, if you have any questions, and it's a short, we can give you a short answer, just please chime in. This is definitely like a discussion, that's why we're all sitting around the table with you and not standing up. So if you have a question, just go ahead and toss it out. If it's a much more technical question that will need some time for us to get to, then we'll just wait until the end. So just, yeah, feel free to say it and then we'll figure out the best moment to address it.
I also have, somebody had emailed about seeing the full RFI submission form, and so I have it printed out here too. And it's also now on the website in the FAQ section, but if anybody wants. So this is sort of just, the BSA, or the innovation practice, our purpose, why we, improve the quality of life for Boston area residents, why we exist, and our aspiration, championing innovation in the built environment, our vision. And this, is part of our mission. And the portfolio of collaborative initiatives is sort of the new way of doing things that we are working on, that we are all here to discuss this evening.
Speak very briefly about some of the ideas or principles that foreground the development of a portfolio of initiatives. In the past, the BSA has been involved in a lot of really excellent work. It was an opportunity over the last few months to rethink how we plan and coordinate and engage with the world more intentionally. So we've developed portfolio models that help us think through how we are strategic about the kind of work we take on. And at any given time, we may have projects or innovations in this case that can start to fill out sectors of a portfolio. So we're thinking about the work that belongs to this composition being segmented in a few ways. Projects that have intentional focus on impacts in the profession or in the discipline of architecture on the lower half of this diagram. Other projects may be more intentionally aimed at resolving or thinking through or dealing with broader societal concerns using the tools and skills and knowledge of architects and architecture. If we look left to right, we can think about projects that belong to the portfolio that are shorter term and that may have shorter term outcomes or returns, anywhere from 6 to 18 months, let's say, versus a handful of projects that are really intentionally longer in duration, acknowledging that this work, as massive and as complex as it can be, takes a long time. So we're hoping to understand how we build out this portfolio moving forward, operating under the hunch that if we start with shorter term returns, in this case, the bottom left corner, shorter term returns in projects that are really impacting the profession and the practice of architecture, we might be able to point to the outcomes of any one of these innovations that comes through the BSA as opportunities for proof points or learnings that can be adopted into practice. We think about shorter term projects that have at their kind of broad aims or goals societal transformation. Those shorter term projects are really about building trust and credibility with a network of stakeholders. Our aim at any of these strategic positionings of work is to get us to a place where we have a body of initiatives that can start to speak to how practice is transforming and how we are intentionally building coalitions that might help us achieve our broader mission of understanding how architecture participates in the pursuit of equity and climate adaptation. So for us now, this first request for innovations, we're starting in the lower left-hand corner. We're starting at the beginning. If we can think about the ways in which the projects that come through might be adopted into practice, we can then build on them moving forward.
Could I make a comment before you pass on?
Yeah.
I also wanted to say that you will hear us commenting like this, hopefully, those will come to you. So one thing I just wanted to highlight, because I know that we're not all architects in the room. I think the idea here is like architecture is bigger than architects, right? And so we're talking about the built environment. Really. So if you're adjacent, if you're interested in places, you know, that are humans and things, you're in the right place. You don't have to be an architect. I'm not an architect. That's very famous. So I think so. I just wanted to make that as a positive. And another comment there in the same vein. This is going, and I think you said this in the middle. I'll just say it just to say. So this is a prototype for us, right? So this is like V0 of a process that will be continuing to run for the foreseeable future. And so all feedback in the process is welcome and encouraged. And so if you're thinking about responding in any way as we get further into this, we are open to all of it. Like if you thought, what about this? What about that? I mean, we're willing to entertain all. This is for us a chance for us to as I said, to rethink and re-engineer what the BSA has traditionally. So just a comment about it. If you're, the non-architects.
I'm sorry, are you with the BSA?
That was my technical. So I will say, I'm a new guy, right? So I will get it wrong, but I'll say it just because, so the Boston Society for Architecture is the Boston chapter of the American Institute for Architects. Is that right? And so that means, so if you go to any big American city, you'll find an AIA chapter, right? That officially, when people become licensed architects, they'll go to their AIA chapter and for professional development and that sort of thing.
Paid them a ton of money.
Yeah, it's not cheap. However, like the BSA, although we do that work, we've also, for many decades, engaged in urban innovation, let's say. So that we've always done sort of work at the fringes of what it needs to be. So we've done a lot of work with design and infrastructure. In this moment, we're trying to focus as much as we can on climate change and the back. Obviously, they're interrelated. But that's the short. So we have this official capacity as an AIA chapter, but we do a lot of this other sort of place building. Does that make sense?
Fish.
Yeah.
I also have a follow-up question. Did the BSA change its name? I always thought it was Boston Society of Architects.
So a couple of years ago, the board did vote to change the name to Boston Society for Architecture, which encompasses the AA chapter as well as the BSA Foundation.
Okay.
Very
Good questions, though.
Yeah.
As Nigel mentioned, we're interested in a lot of things, and I think very genuinely and authentically, each one of us is curious about how architecture works and what architecture does, and how we can start to understand the role that architecture, design, the making and remaking of the built environment participate in issues that have context in social inequity, climate change, and adaptation. And these are some of the ideas that as an innovation practice, we're continuing to ask questions about. These things that we value are also under scrutiny all the time. What do we really mean when we say deep partnerships? And we might think for us, that really is about building coalitions of engaged stakeholders across disciplinary lines, across professional affiliations, across lived experience. If we think about what diverse perspective means here, I think it's an acknowledgement that lived experience is expertise as much as any professional credentialing. When we speak of climate and equity, I think it's important that we underscore that those things are inextricable from one another, and that what we're really pursuing is climate justice, environmental justice as a framework for the work that we hope to be doing. When we talk about impact, when we talk about action, we want to be sure that we're always asking questions about how we're doing this work alongside partners, communities, publics, stakeholders, taking risks and taking ownership of those risks. And that transformative work is never done, truly. And for us, we're hoping to commit ourselves to experimenting and iterating and testing ideas and thinking like designers, to know that we're going to keep testing and trying until we feel satisfied with what where we're going.
Yeah, these are our sort of aspirational values. Right?
Anyone want to add? Okay. With that in mind, the kind of framing of the portfolio as a tool to compose the work that we hope to be doing, and then the values and mission, purpose, and vision as principles or guidelines. This first RFI, I think as many of you know, is asking the question of all of you, how might we do architecture different? When we ask this question, we're hoping to understand how we can push at the edges of architecture as a profession, as a discipline, as a practice, recognizing that shifts in the way that design practice historically and in the future allow us to look more intentionally about how we reframe ways of working in ways that position designers, architects, and those invested in remaking the built environment as champions of pursuits of equity and climate adaptation. We also hope that this RFI, by asking this question, we start to get a whole host of ways of understanding what is architecture's role in these complicated scenarios, and what is an architect or designer's responsibilities here. So that's what we're hoping to generate ideas, innovations, and conversations about to start.
So the next couple of slides are really pulling from the RFI, so you might already be familiar with some of these questions, but we just want to run through them to really highlight what we're really talking about when we frame them. And so this one, for how might we address quality of life conditions for Boston area residents, we're really thinking specifically about geography and the geography of Boston and the social context, the geographic context, and all those aspects.
So, and I think also just to, before moving on, piggyback on that, there's 8 of these, right, that are in the RFI questions, and they're sort of trying to get at a holistic view of what we would hope. We don't expect that every project or every idea is gonna sort of hit on everything, but these are the things that we're thinking about and how we think that all of this work can help us move forward towards our vision and our mission and continue towards our North Star as a collection. So while we recognize that, like, especially, in the framing of asking the first time, that somebody might say, well, it doesn't do this, and that's okay too, but these are the things we're thinking about. We hope that as your idea continues to form, that you also will be thinking about. And for us too, as Ben said, when we, transformation is never done, like, we will continue to say, are these the right questions that we're asking in the ways that we're to? So advancing the pursuits of equity and climate. So, right, we want to hear about how an idea will advance equity or climate, or equity and climate. And as Ben said before, it really, the prime of like what we would hope to be doing, or like our true North Star would be to work at the intersections of the two of them and to really get into these systemic issues of climate justice. And so, being the BSA, we would hope that ideas that are brought to us and that we, collaborate on together would really need to involve architecture and design in some way. And as Nigel mentioned, sort of not necessarily, right, and you don't have to bring it, and we, certainly have networks, but that somehow it involves that in the built environment. makes sense to us to be involved in as well.
It's also an opportunity for each of you to show us what these tools, skills, and knowledges are. And how they might translate across disciplines or across applications.
Yeah, I think a key element there is with the question of the play space, so. Like if you're thinking about the latest and greatest thing in cybersecurity, less interesting. God bless you, but we need more. But in this one, this is about being play space. Starting in Boston, but not limited ultimately by Boston. So the idea is to let's try some things in Boston. Let's prototype here and then explore how we scale it.
Sorry, just a clarification, so when you say Boston, it means Boston, Cambridge.
Yeah, the Boston area.
That-
Yeah, it doesn't have to actually be the city of Boston, but so the BSA is general geography, right, of Eastern Massachusetts. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, just to highlight here too, the question before sort of talks about architecture and design, and this is, our network of members and allied professionals. And so I think one of the strengths of the BSA, right, is our membership, and they're dedicated and passionate and really have a lot of diverse interests, and we have a lot of connections along with other professions, institutions, and other partners, municipal nonprofit. And so that to think about ways that you might say, yeah, this could pull that in, or for even to say, like, I'm interested in exploring these ideas.
Oh, great. We also hope that the responses that each of you submit point directly to outcomes that we might be able to understand as proof points that can be adopted into practice, or learnings that can migrate elsewhere to other audiences. So there's a clarity about the project outcomes being somehow operational, and that we can understand how they fit into a larger way of working. We also want to emphasize that any one of these projects has a network of stakeholders attached to it. They might be intimately related to the project. They might be dissenters to the project, but to understand how you're positioning the work to be really, really supportive of co-designing alongside critical stakeholders in the process. So having those voices represented in the submission is really important.
And then lastly, something else that we're really thinking about too in the submissions to think about is on the piece of scalability, not just how Nigel mentioned in terms of geography, but really about scaling even within Boston for a new audience, in new contexts, and for those new applications. So thinking about scalability really in like an XYZ axis. And then now we've talked a bit about those questions, just some other parameters that we're really looking for is going back to the graph that Ben talked through before in that lower left quadrant, really the 6 to 18 month range for a project or for initiatives is really what we're hoping for right now. Highlighting those proof points for design practice and engaging with new stakeholders and new offerings. And that's not new, in the sense that it's never existed before, being very conscious that stakeholders and offerings are in existence now, and that we're expanding to work with them and engage in that way.
Yeah, really excited about how respondents might think curiously about what a new stakeholder include, or how we might do different things as collections of stakeholder network.
And it's worth noting here, I think we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I think you don't have to have everything figured out beforehand, right? I think the hope here is that we'll be entering into a dialogue and we'll be, talking about this and exploring different ideas, because we might end up with a particular idea. And then after we talk a bit about it and you get a sense of what we're interested in, we might discover there's a different way of articulating that. So, I think it's useful to keep these things in mind, but you don't have to have everything right out.
Yeah,
Okay, great. So just gonna pause quickly. Someone else just joined us. So hi. We already all introduced ourselves, but if you wouldn't mind just saying your name and where you're from, that'd be great.
Eric Johnson, president.
Oh, great, okay. Follow you on Twitter. Great, so we've just gone through some of the early parameters and questions for the initiatives and for this RFI, and so now we're just gonna, excuse me, go a bit more into the BSA resources. So, you know, what we're offering overall as an organization, what the innovation practice offers, and that what each staff on the practice team can also offer.
So the most immediate resource each of you has at arm's length is the team here, the innovation practice of the BSA. And over the course of the development of your work and the partnership or collaborative enterprise we might take on together, the innovation practice will serve in a lot of different roles as co-navigators through that process, as resource detectives, as investigators looking at how we understand what impact is and means and can be measured, as critical inquirers and creative doers. What does that really mean beyond just coaching this kid to scoop better? I think first and foremost, it starts with an acknowledgement that each of us is coming to the work from a particular position, and that we hope to start this dialogue with each of you as a way of inviting a co-design process for project development.
I'm sorry, can you go back to that last slide?
Sure.
I will share the slides with everyone too after.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah. Sure, be sure to share.
We'll give you the high definition version.
So starting with this dialogue about where you want to go and how you want to get there in this process, and thinking about how we can collaborate on designing a pathway or charting a course that keeps in mind your capacity to do the work, what kind of resources or other support you might need to move forward, and simultaneously, as projects gain nuance and specificity, how can we be intentional about alignment of mission, of goals, of principles in ways that are supportive of you?
So another thing, you know, is the resources that, you know, we might be able to sort of collaboratively discuss and figure out. And for us, as I mentioned before, our networks and being able to sort of dive in, whether it's a knowledge community or an outside network of that we collectively all might be able to figure out how to connect with. And then, you know, the financial capital piece, sort of being able to sit and say, you know, what is it that you need? We don't, as we said, and it's our prototype right now, so we didn't want to sort of suppose, oh, we'll give this to each project, but don't be afraid to share with us what your needs are, and we can sit and try to also figure all of that out. So I think just to say that, like, we are really here to help work on that together as a support for you as well.
I will say, so at one point, someone was asking us, why don't we sort of front the money? Like, why don't we just say there's a bunch of money available? And my sense is, in dialogue with people from this community, money isn't the only thing that stands in the way. There's so many other resources that people have access to, whether it's people or knowledge or something. So this is why we're not kind of presuppose what you need, but rather we would rather position ourselves to be in a position to talk through with you. If you need $1 million, probably not. But if you need less than that, we do not. So,
Is there?
barely less. Rather.
So I just have a question then, because I understand and I actually really appreciate a lot of things about the openness of this process. I love that it says 6 to 18, like there's a lot of thought that has gone through this, which I really appreciate. But I think to have a sense of, because, you know, in being in the habit of writing grants,
Right.
I think it would be helpful to know somehow what we're talking about, because
Yeah.
otherwise
Like what sides?
it actually
Yeah.
really affects the kind of work that you are proposing. So if you
Yeah.
are thinking about an 18-month, like involvement. And the reason why I'm asking it is because I work with an interdisciplinary team. And I can like imagine that I could like hold it and not think about my own like time, etc. But I think to kind of have an idea of like, do we need to suspend the whole like financial thing until we pass through the first step? Is that what you're doing?
So I think we're looking for what you think the idea, I think in the first conversation we sort of talked that through. I think we're looking for projects over of a variety of time horizons near middle and long, obviously, and so we could come up with numbers there. But
I think the question that I'm asking
yes.
is, will we do that after the
Oh, I
first
see. Yeah.
submission, or like should we do that in conversation with you before submitting? That's what it was.
I think it would be good to have an idea before you apply, but certainly we could also renegotiate that as the project. If that, if you suddenly realize someone is gonna have a baby or something, right, that's gonna expand things, which is one thing. So yeah, we just want an idea of what the resources and time you think.
And if there's like a couple different pathways that could happen based on that piece, then that's definitely something to come to like at office hours that we're holding upcoming Tuesdays and. we
Yeah,
just
we
have a
would love to
one-on-one,
discuss that, yeah.
a one-on 6.
Cause that's helpful information for us too, right, as we're sort of like going through this process to say like, okay, that's the kind of, right, like. In the whole realm of all the types of resources, like this is also something, and here's the way, like, anyone is thinking about that helps us, right, it doesn't say necessarily like, oh, no, we can't do that, like, no, or like, you know, but like, just thinking about like. Yeah, yeah, great.
I think, sorry, just add on, like, we're also not expecting, I think, like, a detailed line by line budget of what you would need. So, yeah. Oh, great, okay. Oh, this is
Yeah. So let's, I'm just taking a hypothetical here. Let's say we want to build something physically.
Yeah.
Build something in a public space.
Yep.
Would the funding for the construction also be funded by BSA, or would you be looking to find outside partners to help fund the construction?
Well, strictly speaking, we would be looking for, I would say, we don't have a lot of money about that today, so, but yes, we would, you know, we would certainly talk and negotiate with what it is and where it was, because we would also need help with permitting, so we would leverage, relationships that help make that happen. But, and we would also help with the money, in finding, capital that makes sense for you, right? So if it's, whatever the scale of it and the flavor, you know, is it grant funding, or is it, you know, venture capital? So we would have to figure that out too. But we would help with all that.
Great, so part of these resources as well is really thinking about, you know, for us, it's also a prototype, but for all of you, like developing that process, like Ben mentioned, measuring sort of the work that's being done, right? So those outputs or what that looks like, and then also being able to share sort of the process and those objectives. And some of that, like identifying of those outcomes and measuring, you know, will take place in a format that's sort of along the lines of really wanting to have a cohort sentiment. So doing something that might look like a monthly get together where everybody's doing a 7-minute pitch presentation and updating everyone on what the work is looking like. And then also doing smaller meetings with someone on the team to talk about what your objectives are and sort of seeing how you're getting there, but also making sure that there's still space for inquiry and kind of going off on some of those tangents. And then also having a digital space that's available to you for all of us to communicate, but also to share resources. If you're like cross-pollinating ideas with other teams, to share your process, and also to sort of develop and contribute to a larger sort of network map of all of the stakeholders, right? If one team is working with the city of Boston and so is another one, that we can all kind of see that together and talk about it. And so, yeah, so just contributing to these sort of external network mapping, having internal insights that are also really important to us as we're going through this initial process, so that, you know, we can really understand like what's working for you, how can we better help, like how can we work on this moving forward, and also like how can we think about this for future research with you and at the BSA at large.
That's a really good point. I'll say that I think we want this process to work for you. So I think is the vision here is that we're understanding how the built environment, affects issues of equity and think about like mass tax, right? So is that there's buildings everywhere that are changing people's sense of safety and place and all these different things. So we would want the outcomes to also, be done and articulate in a way that serves our purposes. So if you're going to be looking for, further grant funding or something, we want to be able to support you in doing that. So we would work together to try to figure out what you would need also. To influence the doing.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a good segue, also thinking about the kind of question asking that will enrich your project and the opportunities to position your work in dialogue with folks that it may not already be in dialogue with. So how do we extend the potency of the conversations we hope to have in other audiences and other places? And how do we look outward and ask thoughtful questions to enrich the project that you might already be undertaking? So thinking about a kind of looking out as a way of doing research to help supplement, enrich, add other vibrancy to the work that you're already involved in. Celebrating these ideas of input, asking better questions about the work, and thinking about who else wants to be involved in those conversations. It's also ideally, as Madeline was describing, the metrics of impact that may inform the kind of looking in we might do with the work. These kind of looking out questions also help us at the BSA and innovation practice determine the frameworks of a research agenda that might be shifting and changing and dialogue over time.
Forgive my ignorance, but
Yeah.
what is the current research agenda? Is that on the website? Because I looked at that.
Yeah, so this is part of the new way, our new way of sort of working and thinking, sort of the looking out process, right? So that is both informed by so many different things, right? By like our own sort of staff, what we're hearing, what we're interested in, what we're seeing, and sort of also by our community here, right? Of saying, what are opportunities that are being presented to us and what are things that we can build on and connect as well and sort of to develop. It will develop as all of this develops alongside. So, and Wandy, who is on her way right now, is sort of that will be, amongst others, being part of the team as well. Like that is her focus of the work too. So.
So microscopes, compasses, magnifying glasses aside, the BSA does have a track record of doing things in support of our partners' work and in collaboration with a variety of stakeholders, civic, public, community, allied professionals. So this is a non-exhaustive list of things we've done in the past. And just to give you a sense of what we are capable of doing, hosting charrettes and workshops, pulling in a multitude of voices to participate in kind of co-creation of your work, facilitating conferences and symposia that bring thought leaders from multiple places and disciplines, design competitions, public engagement, particularly creative strategies for engaging with broader public audiences in these processes, exhibitions, as you see, access to this space and access to our broad networks. Okay. We're going to turn to you all soon, but this is where we hope to hear from you. What is it that you're curious about? And we hope to maybe give you some insight into the process as it's been explained via the R5, but maybe hopefully give a little bit more clarity to what we intend here. So how do we move your ideas through this process towards impact? I'm not sure who's talking. Is Wandy here? I'm just kidding. You want to talk about this?
Yeah, so this is also like everything else in the RFI as well, but just wanted to go through some of the the phases of of where all of this goes.
So as project submissions come in, they'll be reviewed by a committee board members and staff.
Right, we call it the SAM committee, which is sort of just internal lingo that doesn't really have
Yeah.
much bearing, but yeah.
Let's just say selection. committee
Selection
for now.
committee, yeah.
And they will be reviewing all of the project submissions that come through based on the evaluation criteria, those pink questions that we asked. And scored on a rubric as to what degree the project is representative of those things. From there, the SAM committee will recommend to the innovation practice a short list of projects to pursue moving forward. Each of you there, and we should also mention that this is not a closed process ever. So from now until project submissions are due, we're here to have conversations with you about how you want to pursue this work.
Right, we have the office hours set up, and if that doesn't work, you just, send us a note, we'll always have to. So it's
With that short list of projects, we hope to spend more time in dialogue with each of you, understanding alignments of strategy and also capacity and capability. From there, there will be an open house here at the BSA where each submitting team or submitter will be sharing their work and their ambitions to a crowd. Ideally, folks who would be interested in providing resources, either social, professional, or financial, to keep the project moving. And from there, 2 to 3 of these innovations will compose our inaugural cohort.
So yeah, these are just the dates, right, that are listed on there, and so we'll have those RFI office hours and submissions will be due in January. And then the selection committee, will go through the process and sort of meet and the consensus model to decide on those, and then internally figure out what resources we have and match that and, use that portfolio model as well, sort of get the right mix that works on all ends. We'll reach out to the shortlisted in the open house, as Ben said, it's an opportunity to both talk about the work and present it out, and also to meet other people, right? And so we certainly hope that anyone who has applied or is interested, no matter how far an application would get, would sort of also be able to use this opportunity to talk about their work and, meet someone there also who could be interested, even if the BSA doesn't have the capacity at the moment.
We also talk a lot about projects that may not be evaluated in a way that proceed through the selection committee, but are still of interest to the innovation practice. So thinking about what that mechanism is to be clear about how we might support projects, even if they aren't, they don't satisfy the evaluation criteria.
So, right, finalists will be notified, and then the work begins March 13th, and that sort of is us working with you again to sort of sit and say, okay, how are we, right, like we're aligned here, what's our expectations of one another, how are we, right, getting those resources, how are we making those connections, and so when we say like the work begins, it's not necessarily have to be like, okay, like the clock is ticking, but like, that's when we start to figure out like, the real how to get it done, right?
Email us at any time, and we'll be sure we have all of your emails if you register tonight, to keep you informed of any updates or news. We'll share this presentation with you all. But I think now we're ready to turn it over to hear from each of you in a moment. So thanks for listening.
Are these slides gonna be emailed out, you said?
Yes.
Yeah. And this recording will be also.
Yes.
We want to break.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
break, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll start
perfect.
recording as well.